2021 annual community budgeting process.
And if we're ready, I say we should go ahead and begin. I have started the recording.
Okay, thank you, Erin.
You're welcome.
Hello, and welcome to today's Community Affairs Committee webinar. My name is Anne-Marie Queenie, and I am the CAC Chair. Today, James Bousquet, STC Treasurer, will present 2021 Annual Community Budgeting Process. Thank you for attending today. And with the budget season about to start, this is a timely and useful topic. Before we begin, I'd like to give you a quick preview of upcoming CAC events. Later this month, on October 21st, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the CAC will be hosting an open house. So I hope you can join us and meet the CAC team. We'll share our plans for the upcoming year, and there will be time for discussion and suggestions that you may have. Registration is open, and a little later on, I'll put the registration link in the chat panel, but it is on the STC website under Leadership Programs. And then at the end of the month, on October 27th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Jamie Sagan, who's the CAC director, will be hosting our first virtual meetup of the 2020-21 season. And let's gather together and celebrate Halloween a bit early. According to Jamie, we can bring your favorite witch's brew and wear something festive, work-friendly for Halloween. And registration is also open for that. So that will be a fun social time for the leaders. And just looking ahead, in December, Erin Galilee, the STC Director of Membership and Community Relations, will present a webinar on using the community reports. So even if you've been using them for a while, I'm sure there's always some tips and techniques that we could learn. So now, just for a few housekeeping details, Erin is our webinar's technical manager, and as Erin has mentioned, she has placed everyone on mute. James will answer questions during the webinar as time allows. So please add comments or questions in the chat panel, and Erin and I will monitor the panel. And now it is my pleasure to introduce James Bousquet, STC Treasurer.
Thanks very much, Anne-Marie. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. And as Murphy would have it, my phone on the other side of my study is starting to ring just as I'm starting, but that's okay, it'll stop shortly. Yeah, so welcome to the STC Community Budgeting. As Anne-Marie mentioned, I've done this in past years, and it's usually generates a lot of interest. So just first, a little bit about me. I work as a senior customer training coordinator at ATS Automation here in Cambridge, Ontario, Canada. Well, I'd say here, I'm actually here at home in Waterloo, Ontario, which is about 20 minutes away from Cambridge. I've been the STC Treasurer for I'm into my second term now. So at the end of this year, that is to say, at the next STC Summit, I'll be rolling off the board. So I've been doing this for a little while. As we go along, as Anne-Marie mentioned, feel free to put questions in the chat. Erin and she will be keeping an eye on that and letting me know if you've got any questions. And I'm a fan of dealing with questions when they arise. I think it works best that way when it's on people's minds as opposed to waiting to the end. In past years, we've only had 30 minutes for this talk, and yeah, when I'm cramped for time, it usually makes more sense to hold them to the end. But now we've booked 60 minutes for this. We might not use it all, but we do have that leeway. So feel free to ask as we go. What we're going to cover, just talk about the budget process a little bit, the key dates that you need to keep in mind. We'll walk through the major points of the budget template that that you'll be receiving if you are a community leader or treasurer. For those of you in the US, which is probably most of you, most of our communities are in the US, chapters that is, this is usually a good time to talk about tax filing, even though this isn't the time of year for that. But I don't do a separate talk about that. I've just added a couple of slides to this talk just to let people know how easy it is, of course. And I've already covered how we're going to handle questions this time around. So without any further ado, let's begin. This session, as I said, we've got two major objectives. One is to help you understand the budgeting process and how to submit your budget properly and on time. And if you're a U.S. chapter, we'll chat a little bit about filing your income tax return. So why do we do this? We set a budget. Some people seem to be daunted by the amount of work that it generates for treasurers. It doesn't, I don't think it needs to be particularly complicated, but it is something that really is good practice, and it really needs to be done. Just for yourselves as a community, you want to check to see if you're, the plans that you make for the coming year, do they make sense? And it's also an opportunity for community leaders to have an excuse to sit down and start talking all at the same time about what do we plan for the next year. We've got 60 some communities in STC right now, and some are very large, some are very small, some have a lot of activity, some are a little more quiet with a few events, and some are happy to stay the way they are. Others would like to change. Some have leaders that come and go. Others have the same people doing everything year after year. I think you'll all recognize which kind of community you're a part of, but in any case, it makes sense to think ahead and think about what you're planning to do in the coming year. So setting a budget is also meshes well into that. When you're thinking about new initiatives, when you're thinking about the things that we do already, are we slowly going broke? If we try this new thing, is it going to pay for itself, or do we have really high reserves and we can offer these programs for our members that offer great value for a low price or even free? So it comes down to basically using your resources for the benefit of your community members. One of the things that we talk about is some communities can have really high reserves, and those of you who've been through this process before may have had comments from the Community Budget Review Committee about that. The idea is that we're as a not-for-profit kind of an organization, the idea isn't to accumulate wealth, and having money sitting in the bank not doing anything really isn't good. The reason we exist is to provide benefits and services to our members, and we're best doing that by using those resources for those purposes. So all this is by way of saying it's in the fall, it's a good time to get your leadership together and think about what kinds of programs and events you're thinking of offering next year. Now, it's not, it's a budget, it's not a contract. If there's something in your budget that you wind up not doing, or if you think you'd like to do something that wasn't in your budget, it's not the end of the world, but at least you'll know that when we started with a budget, we reviewed it, it made sense. Now this new thing that we're thinking of doing in July next year, how does that affect our budget? Is it going to send us off the rails and we'll wind up with that program that we wanted to do in December. We're not going to have money for that. Those are the, just the basic kinds of things that we're trying to address by having a budget. So the budget is also part of your community's funding request. So I think everybody is aware as a community leader that the STC provides annual funding for chapters, but there are some requirements for that. One is that you submit this budget on time and that it be reviewed by the Community Budget Review Committee and that we approve it. There are also a couple of other things. There's in addition to the budget, the other major thing that treasurers do is submit a financial report in the spring on the previous year. So I should just distinguish those. The budget is your plan for the following year. A financial report that you submit in the spring is a report, excuse me, on the actual transactions that took place in the previous year. So there's the budget, the financial report, your tax filing, and we'll talk about that a little later, as I said. So those all need to be in place in order for the funding check to be released. And that funding check is based on a formula. If you're a chapter, then the amount that your chapter receives is $15 per member. And the membership count that gets used is August 31st of the previous year. So, if you're a chapter, the number of members that you had in STC records as of August 31st, 2020 will determine the size of the check or the e-transfer that you get in January of 2021 to cover for 2021. If you're a SIG, you probably know that we've tweaked the model for SIGs this year. We've got communities of practice, which are, I won't get into it, but they're typically more active and offer more programs, whereas communities of interest are they may be smaller, they may be less active, they may basically be simply an online forum for people to ask questions. That some of those are active and some of them aren't so much. So for communities of practice, we used to fund all SIGs to the tune of $4 per member. That's been raised this year, but only for communities of practice to $5 per member. And communities of interest, since they often don't have much in the way of expenses and wind up not using their funding for the most part, will be getting $0 per member next year. So yeah, just so people realize, this often comes up with interactions with head office and with the board sometimes too. People wonder about, well, why isn't it, if I pay a certain amount to join a chapter, why doesn't the chapter receive all that money? Well, they only receive part of that in the form of, $15 per chapter, $5 per community of practice. The community, the fees that you pay as part of your registration fee go towards supporting costs of operating communities. The staff at head office spend time supporting communities directly and supporting the CAC. And there's also a component of the overall overhead of operating the office that gets divvied out by the accountants to various programs like, the summit, for example, education programs, our publications, and also supporting communities. Communities are one of those programs that, the amount you pay to join a community doesn't cover the cost of operating communities, but we do give part of it to the communities to help them with their programs. So that's the formula. That's how your community funding amount is established. when you and your the rest of your community leadership get together to start the funding process, typically, the treasurer will draft a budget based on past year's budgets. If you're a new treasurer, hopefully you received records from the previous treasurer or from somebody that has given you access to past records. And from those you can see, if you've got the past budget, then it's probably a simple matter of looking at what's typical for your particular community. As I said earlier, some are active. They might have a very large weekend workshop session with people from out of town. Others may have only smaller local events, various kinds of networking programs and so forth. But at any rate, take a look at those and transfer. If you just want next year to be pretty much like this year, then it's going to be a relatively easy exercise. But you do want to do that and then run it past the rest of your community leadership, and make sure everybody's in agreement. Nobody's getting any surprises. Nobody had any ideas that they're going to be disappointed weren't implemented. That sort of thing. So based on your goals for the previous year and for the next year, put together a draft budget. And once you've done that, have a look, see, do I have a huge surplus or a huge shortfall? If you've got a big surplus, then you might consider changing your fees or, adding some programs that will deliver value to your members. If there's a shortfall, then obviously you need to go back and look at it the other way, because, you can't be in December and be bankrupt. People will be expecting your programs. Make sure everybody on your council approves it and send your final copy to STC. 3 to 6 weeks, usually, that's a ballpark. Basically, after you send it for review, the Community Budget Review Committee doesn't meet every day. We typically meet every week or two, depending on the availability of who's on the committee that particular year. So yeah, if you happen to send it the day before our next meeting, and there's not a big backlog ahead of you, then it's going to be reviewed more promptly. But yeah, it shouldn't take too long at the outset. Yeah. Chapters will receive their funding in one payment, as it says here, typically in January. And SIGs on their funds are kept at head office in the head office bank account, but earmarked for your SIG. And as past SIG treasurers will know, there's a form that gets filled out by you, and you send that to head office, and then head office will send you a reimbursement check for that expense that you've incurred. So there's a difference there. So when you're drafting your budget, what the kinds of things that you want to consider, and the kinds of things that the Community Budget Review Committee is going to consider, is looking at your programs. For example, your meetings. Is what you receive as revenue from your programs, how does that stack up against the expenses for those programs? Do you have really high reserves? So, if you're losing a lot of money on your meetings, that might be okay if you've really got high reserves. And in past years, we've asked you to try to spend those down by providing value to members and making events cheaper or free, or incurring expenses that provide value to members. Those are all ways of doing that. So that's really our goal, is to make STC something that really has value for members. The kinds of things that I've seen in past years that we when I look at when we do make recommendations to communities about their budget, web hosting expenses. I think we've. I'm not sure if we still are concerned about that. Some chapters used to spend money on their own web hosting, and some could incur pretty high fees when they were able to do it through head office. Other high expenses for banking or mail services. You know, I think most people will do things electronically now. So you know, we still see some communities that are incurring high expenses for, you know, post office boxes and shipping, and so we're not going to forbid these kinds of things, but you know, we do question them sometimes, especially if it's something new that we didn't see in past years. If you've got programming that looks like it's not sustainable, or you know, we have had the odd community that submits a budget that comes out negative without having reworked it, and you know, we can't approve that. You know, if you're telling us that you're planning to spend more money than you're getting through your revenue funding and previous year's reserves, that's just not going to work. And you know, we can't approve something like that. So usually it's a simple matter of sending it back for rework, but that doesn't happen very often. I think last year we had one, maybe two submissions like that. So key dates to keep in mind. This year, we're making the budgets due on the 30th of October. Normally it's the 31st, but that's a Saturday this year. So if you do need more time, that's okay. It's not unusual. We like to get started on this process as a committee when we can. So if you can get your budgets to us by the end of October, we really appreciate it. But if you do need an extension, please make sure you request it before the end of October. We don't like having to send out reminders to communities. You know, and there can be a few, and it just makes for extra work. And as I say, with the number of communities we've got, this is already eating into people's time. I've got here mid-November. Our first kickoff meeting for the Budget Review Committee is going to be this Friday, so we're going to get started earlier than mid-November. But by mid-November, you know, things will really be going in earnest, and we may even be starting to send responses to some people by that point. Even if you do have an extension, that needs to be, your budget needs to be in by the end of December. We don't, unless it's something really extraordinary, we don't grant extensions past the end of December. As I say, this process needs to wind up not too long into the new year. And as I said, in January is when head office sends out funds to people. Last year, we started sending out electronic transfers to communities that gave us that information, and we'll be including the form for that, and with the budget template that we send out to chapters very shortly. So, do we have any questions yet, Erin or Anne-Marie? Just thought before I get
no
into the template.
Yet, James.
Okay, thanks. So that's great. We'll get into the budget template. We'll just touch on some of the major points on it. It's basically just a few steps. A couple of them will take you a bit longer than others. The first step is just the header information up at the top. I've tweaked the budget template for this year, cleaned it up a little bit, but please, last year was actually pretty good for this, but make sure you, excuse me, fill in your chapter name and the other information that you see here in red. It really helps us not have to chase down which chapter this is for, and who to send the funding check to, what your postal address is. I mentioned electronic funds transfers. I'm going to tweak this this template a little further to let you know. So we're not forcing you to give us your postal address. If you're going to be getting an e-transfer, I'm going to insert a little checkbox or something like that, so you can indicate that here that that's your preference. But the key thing that this came up in the last week is that the person getting the check or the funds needs to be an STC member. There are some chapters that are trying to entice non-members to volunteer for their council, and you know, they're people who aren't STC members. Head office won't send chapter funding to a non-member. You know, that's just not good practice. And also earlier this week, it raised the issue of communities offering to pay membership fees to entice a non-member to be on council. That's also not a good practice. It's really the IRS rules that come into play here. The IRS forbids that kind of thing to associations in general as an inurement. That's something that not-for-profits can't do. It would jeopardize STC's nonprofit status. If you think about it, you know, a nonprofit is, you know, we do, excuse me, we do get benefits from being a part of this association, but monetarily, members aren't supposed to profit financially from membership in the organization. And you know, membership dues pays for services and benefits. So if you're getting a free membership for volunteering, then it's not volunteering anymore. And the IRS doesn't look at it that way either. So yeah, so just make sure that whoever your treasurer is, that they're actually an STC member. Thanks. So the next step after that header information is pretty quick. When you get your budget package from Erin, she's going to provide you with the number, according to STC's records, of what your community's membership number was as of the 31st of October this year. And that's the number that you should plug in here where that 0 is. And the green cell will then automatically update. There's a formula in there that will automatically update with, in the case of chapters, $15 per member. It's simple multiplication, but and that raises something. In this template, essentially the cells that are colored green like this contain formulas. So just bear that in mind. You don't need to type anything into those cells. Those will be updated automatically. Sometimes we get budgets where people have manually typed numbers in there and then changed something later, and then it kind of messes things up. So if you do change those green cells, be very, very careful, and you shouldn't need to in the first place. Thanks. The next step is your bank account information. And we've got 2 separate sections here, one for restricted funds and one for non-restricted funds. Just to let you know, not very many chapters have restricted funds. And what we mean by that is, say you've received a donation or an endowment for a scholarship, perhaps, or something of that nature, where the donor that provided those funds had stipulations on what those funds were for. Any other money, any other bank accounts, those should be listed down in the lower section where it says non-restricted funds. Even if you've earmarked, say, a certain amount to pay expenses for, you know, sending a leader to summit, for example, or whatever, that's what the budget's for. That's not restricted funds. Your council has the leeway to decide to change their mind on what they'd spend those funds on, and it's only the non-restricted reserve funds that are taken into account further down on the spreadsheet to figure out your total net that gets added on to any increase or decrease that you experience during the the year, and your reserves might make up some of that, or you might add to your reserves depending on your chapter situation. But at any rate, just list your bank accounts. You know, most chapters will just have, you know, under non-restricted funds, they'll have checking account and then the amount, the balance in their checking account. Some might have one or two other accounts, like a savings account or some kind of investment account of one sort or another. But most chapters have at least a checking account. You might even have some cash that, you know, as petty cash or a float that you use for your events. That would also be listed here under non-restricted funds. One last thing about listing your non-restricted funds here is I know you're filling this out in October. Just try to put down an estimate of, you know, if of what it will be at the end of December. So these are, as it says at the header there, these are estimates for the end of the year, December 31st, 2020. If you don't have any other events or expenses or revenues expected in November, December, then fine, just use your checking account balance. But if you've got a excuse me, a wind up event in December or some sort of Christmas social, you know, just estimate how that's going to affect your bank account balances and put that here. Use those numbers. Okay, so then we get into the meat of it. So we've got your header information, the number of members, and your bank account information. Anne-Marie, are you trying to, somebody got a question?
I'm sorry. I have found that some people have been putting questions into another panel, and I found them. So I'm going to mention some of these, and if this is something you'd rather wait to the end, you can tell me. Or
oh no, let's go ahead. I was actually a little surprised earlier that there weren't any questions yet. I thought, oh, these people are quiet. That's so please go ahead. Well, before I say that, how many do we have?
We have a very nice number. 23 people are here listening, so very interesting.
But how many questions? I mean.
Oh, sorry. There's about 6 or 5.
Okay, well let's try to see if we can cover them quickly here.
Okay. This is from Joel, and he says, a quick question for what James has said. Is there web hosting through the STC? I asked the STC webmaster last year and did not receive a response. It says
Yeah.
we do have our own.
We did offer web hosting free to communities. Now we've had a lot of changes this year. That's why I kind of hesitated, and that might have been what led to this question. Maybe can I defer that to Aaron, because I'm not sure. Now we're working with an association management company, and they're looking after our all of our web needs now. And Aaron, do you know if we're offering that service to communities still, now that we've made this change? Is Aaron muted?
I was muted. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And
forgive me if I'm putting you on the spot.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't hear the full question. I'm sorry.
Okay. The question was with regards to web hosting.
Okay.
Yeah. Do we still offer that to communities to do their web hosting through STC?
There are some of our groups that are hosted by us. I would say if anybody has a question to clarify if they are web hosted, if they want to be web hosted, just to understand that, to go ahead and send me an email and we'll figure it out with our association management company. We'll see where everybody is and then we'll see what plans are. We have a technology task force that has been set up. Also a volunteer STC members who can also help address some questions if people have questions about their chapter and those types of things regarding hosting and emails and just their sites and such. So we can answer a lot of their IT questions on an ad hoc basis based off of their needs. So I would say just send us a note because everybody's kind of individual and we'll see where you are and then what your plans would need to be or what you would think you would. We'll go from there.
Well, thanks, Aaron. So Joel, yeah, there's the answer, I guess. For this year, we're playing it by ear a little more than in past years, and contact head office, Erin specifically, and she'll follow up with the association management company and the IT people there as to how we'll manage that going forward. Next question, Anne-Marie.
A brief update from Liz Poland. She says, yes, the goal is to get all communities under our hosting. And like you said, that'll be eventual. So yes, Joel's going to contact Erin.
Perfect.
The second question is, the STC chapter membership spreadsheets have been inaccurate. How do we ensure that the number you use for our August 31st total is accurate?
As far as I know, the numbers that we have been using are accurate. I know in past years there's always one or two chapters, I think. No, communities, yeah, that contest. There's, so. Again, I'm going to have to defer this to Erin, because usually what we do is when questions like that come up, we turn to STC staff, because they're the ones who have access to that database, and they're the ones that pull the numbers. Sometimes it comes down to time of day, from what I understand, from when the numbers are pulled. Again, Liz or Erin, do you have anything to add to that? Sorry, that's not a very good answer.
It's okay, and it's accurate. This is Erin. I pulled the rosters for every group on August 31st at about midnight my time. So it was close to the close of business. I was up and doing that then. So I have the list. As Jim said, there are always exceptions. There are people who may be on the list, who may not be on the list, who you may think, and those are a question of a case-by-case basis. The list should be pretty accurate, but I will share those lists with each of the groups, and if there's any numbers, or if you have different numbers or different names, we can handle those on a case-by-case basis as well, to see if someone should have signed up or if something happened with their membership, because there are a couple exceptions that happen every year, people as they go through the membership season. And they're still attending chapter events, so there's sometimes some confusion, something caught on. So, but we can handle all of these questions, but it's just really an individualized chapter and person experience. So I'll have to see a specific case to answer specifically. But again, feel free to send me an email, and we can talk over any of the rosters that you have. I'm open to do that, and I'll share all the ones that I did on the 31st. And if you did them as well, we can compare.
Okay, thanks, Erin. Yeah, so I guess it comes down to that. I mean, if you look at your number on August 31st and it doesn't match, the number that you get from Erin, which should be totally accurate, and as far as we know, it's accurate. But everybody, and with the number of members we've got, as Erin mentioned, surprises do happen. Someone thinks they're a member and they weren't on the list or whatever, and we can. We can work with you on correcting that. Sometimes it's STC's records, and sometimes it's the community that misunderstood something. So it varies. The answer is to work with head office if you do have a surprise, and we'll sort it out. Next question, Anne-Marie.
Yes. And when should we expect to receive this budget? This year's budget template, and is it sent to the treasurer at the chapter organization email address?
Yeah, I'll be putting together an email blast. I've got just that one tweak to make to the budget template. That is to indicate whether you want a posted check or an electronic funds transfer, whatever your preference is. But other than that, I've got that. Erin will send that template, the the ETF form, and my email blast out to chapters. I expect in the next week or two. Say we're having our kickoff meeting on Friday, so it might be early next week, something like that.
Okay. And it's sent to the email address that the treasurer has provided, correct?
Yeah, what we have on file at head office for your treasurer information.
And there's one last question, but I think we can hold this one to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Because it says, can you go back to the important dates website? I had to switch between computers, but I know you're right in the middle of this, so perhaps we can hold that to the end.
Okay. Yeah, and the well, here I can just go back quickly. It won't take long because there's not much there in the way of dates. But these slides will be made available after this recording after this talk as well. Aaron's going to be sending out the recording of this along with a PDF of the slides. So there are the dates here: the end of October to submit the budgets. The Community Budget Review Committee will be starting actually at the end of this week, but we'll be in full steam ahead by mid-November. If you do need an extension to submit your budget, please let us know before the end of October, and we'll grant extensions as late as the end of December. But please only do that if you really need it. What we'd like to avoid is getting a big batch of budgets all in that last week of December when we could have been reviewing them earlier. And typically into mid-January-ish is when staff starts forwarding funds out to communities. Okay, so I'm going to move ahead again, but if you didn't catch those, just bear in mind that all of these slides will be available to you later as well. I've got some website addresses and other resources as well that you're probably not going to want to have to write down. So again, this is all very tiny, but just by way of a screenshot of the revenue section of the budget. So just to recap, we've done the header information, you've put in the number of members, you've put in your bank balances estimated for the end of the year. Now you're going to list your cash inflows that you're expecting for 2021. So there's this little section here for general revenues and another section below that for programs revenue. So those programs revenues for things that you can, specific events, meetings, awards night, webinars, things like that, that you get revenue for. The general revenue up at the top includes things like funding from head office. Some chapters get donations from companies in their area, or job bank advertising, sponsorships. Those kinds of things you can't ascribe to a specific program, go in that general revenue section up at the top. And that you can see the one green cell in the funding from head office row, that gets automatically populated as well, based on the number up above for your community funding amount that gets calculated. Okay, so revenue, and then on the other side further down is expenses. So very similar exercise here, just go through all the expenses, and if you've got your records from past years, the revenue and expenses, it looks like a lot of tweaking cells in Excel, but you know, unless you're making some drastic changes this year or you don't have access to previous year's records, it shouldn't be too difficult. And that reminds me, if you could please include previous year's data, that's really helpful to the Community Budget Review Committee. It helps us understand if your community is got exciting plans, or if you're perhaps beginning to struggle. Those are you know, it's not purely budget related, but we also always have on the Community Budget Review Committee a representative from the Community Affairs Committee, so they can get some visibility into how different communities are doing. And this is often sometimes the first time that that flags get raised for particular communities that the CAC can then reach out to and try to help, either with finding volunteers or with programs and so forth, that might be able to make them more successful. So revenues, expenses, one minus the other gives you a net surplus or loss. So if you've got a loss for just for next year, that could be okay if you've got reserves that will cover that. So again, we've got all green cells here. So these are all automatically populated down at the bottom of the spreadsheet. And that final total, though, that bottom line, that needs to be positive. And what you should have, so that's going to be the amount that you're going to carry into the following year, 2022. And that amount, as some of you apply for community achievement awards may know, that what we're targeting is that total amount, those reserves, not be too high or too low. If they're too low, then it can be kind of, you know, dodgy if you have to, for example, give a deposit on a meeting space or something like that, and you might be caught short if you don't get the number of people that you think you're going to get. On the other hand, if they're too high, then, as I said earlier, you've got money that's sitting in a bank account not doing anything for your members, and you might be able to put that towards either expenses or you know, reducing registration fees or something of that nature, to bringing in speakers from out of town, for example, or something like that. Basically something that would create value for your members. So that's the spreadsheet itself and the form itself. So as I say, the treasurer should draft it. The rest of your council should also have input, if only to review it, if not to play an active role in filling in those cells for next year. What the Community Budget Review Committee is trying to do, I touched on this already, but to analyze, not just to look at your finances, but to look at your activities. You know, we see budget amounts, but that doesn't always give full insight into what's going on with your chapter. For example, my local chapter had free, you know, an arrangement going with an organization in town that supports startups and peer-to-peer networking and that sort of thing, and they were providing us with free meeting space, which was really nice. You know, they even had a small budget for pizza and stuff like that. So, you know, if you looked at our budget, it looked like there really wasn't very much going on when actually there was. So a couple of years ago, we took to adding a couple of extra tabs to the budget spreadsheet. So we've got the budget for the next year, but there's also these two additional things called the activity report and the engagement plan. The activity report is a report on the past year. The engagement plan is a report for the following year. So essentially, what are those things? Well, the activity report, as I say, it's for an activity report for the previous year. It's a tab at you'll see that tab at the bottom of the spreadsheet that the budget is included with, and it's basically just a list. You know, we provide you, this is what it looks like. It's a table. What kind of programs, just a quick description of what happened. Was it a webinar? Was it an education event? Was it an awards night? So these are all things in your activity report that you said in last year's engagement plan that you were planning on doing. So just list all those here and say whether or not they were done. And you know, we don't need an attendance list or anything like that, but most people can remember, you know, was there 5 or 6 people there, or were there 20 or 30 people there? Just give an approximate number there. So, you know, we've got a sense of, you know, how active your chapter is, or, you know, So there's two sections. There are two sections, one for event programs, these kinds of things, meetings and such. There are also another section below, just another identical list for ongoing programs, things that you can't ascribe to a particular event. So for example, if you've got drawing a blank here, but some sort of, networking space, say you use Slack actively or something like that, some other way for people to interact and get value from your community, you put that here as well. So we're looking to make sure that communities are actually engaging their members and following up. So the activity report is for the previous year. The engagement plan is for the coming year. So what kinds of things are you planning for the coming year? And again, it's just a simple list like this. Sorry, Anne-Marie, is there another question?
Before we go on to the next point, Richard had a question. Yes, by previous year, do you mean the current year or the year before the year we're budgeting for?
Okay. So yeah, good question. So here we are in October 2020. So on the financial side, your budget is for the year 2021. The financial report that you'll submit next spring in May of 2021 will be a report on the calendar year 2020. I hope that makes sense. So similarly with the activity report and the engagement plan, we've tried to use, think of the report as a report on something that already happened. So the activity report is a report on 2020. What happened this past year? The engagement plan is what you're planning to do in the coming year, 2021. I hope that makes sense.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good question. And then I think, yeah, maybe we might consider renaming these to make it more clear. Just having a report on something that has happened and a plan on something that's you're planning to have happen. Maybe that's, I don't think that's enough. Yeah. Thanks. It's not the first time people have asked about that, so that's a flag to me to say that yeah, perhaps we could name these better. But thanks. Yeah, so you can see this is a very similar list. The only difference is that there's no column for the number of participants because you don't know yet. But you can give a description, again, just a quick, rough description. And we provide this template not to try to be pedantic about it, but what we have had people give us very long, involved, detailed. We don't want you spending a lot of time on this. We don't want it to be hard work. I think treasurers and community leaders also already do a lot of great work, and we don't want to make this too onerous. But we would like to just know what kinds of things you're planning. As I said earlier, we've got some chapters that are large, small, active, quiet, but we do want to see that you've got at least a few things going on. So, and to get more specific, we'd like to see at least one event per quarter. If you're a student chapter, an event each term that your school program is in session. We're flexible about what goes on in the summer. Ongoing programs count as an event. And if you do have, you send a leader to summit, it's great if you can have some sort of knowledge transfer session. So the leader is reporting back to your chapter on what kinds of things happened at Leadership Day, what's coming down the pipe, if there's any news that way. And also perhaps, relaying some information in whatever way you see fit, whether it's through a blog or a brief presentation or seminar on something that was their favorite session, for example. And as I mentioned earlier, in order to be funded, your community needs to be up to date with their budget submissions, their financial reports, your income tax return, and also this is a good time to update us with your leadership names and their contact information. So your president, secretary, and treasurer at a minimum. So we've got that information. As I said earlier, review your budget with your council and then submit it to STC. And these are the specific, if you could email it to these three people, Erin Galilee, she's on the call now, the Director of Membership and Community Relations, Liz Poland, the CEO, and whoever the treasurer happens to be at the time, which right now is me, Jim Bousquet. So yeah, we're at 7 o'clock. I apologize for going over here. We'll just quickly go through these last ones with regards to income tax. I mentioned all chapters need to be up to date, or all US chapters, well, all chapters should be up to date with their income tax filing, but in order to qualify for funding, we only ask US chapters to provide proof of their having filed a Form 990. If you're a Canadian chapter, contact me. I'm in Canada. I used to be treasurer of a Canadian chapter, and I can help you with that. No problem. If you're from somewhere else in the world, India perhaps, check with your appropriate government agency, but make sure you do whatever, fulfill whatever requirements that you need to file income taxes. The US income tax Form 990 is due May 15th of the year following the reporting year. So this is something that needs to be done in the spring. If you don't file that for 3 consecutive years, the IRS will automatically toast your tax exempt status, and it could have ramifications for the broader STC as well. But generally, it's a fairly simple matter. I really wish that Canadian income tax filing was this simple. If your chapter income is less than $50,000, and this covers the vast majority of STC chapters, all that you need to do is fill out this online e-postcard, it's called, with your EIN number. It's your chapter's EIN number, not STC's, please. If you don't know it, you can get it from head office. Erin would be happy to provide that to you. The legal name and mailing address of your chapter, the name and address of your principal officer, if you've got a website address, and just a tick box confirming that your gross income is indeed less than $50,000. There's also one additional catch, that your unrelated business income be less than $1,000. So what that means is unrelated business income is income from things other than providing education and those sorts of services to your members. So that would be income from advertising, for example. So not too many chapters have that much unrelated business income. And you'll get a confirmation that you've submitted. Save that PDF and include that with your report, your financial report in the spring when you send that into STC. For those rare chapters that do have really high income, or if yours has a very fortunate year, there's a different form that needs to be filled out, and STC head office will help you out with that if that's the case with you. Similarly, if you do have net unrelated business income greater than $1,000, head office will help you with that as well. Sorry, I'm going quickly through this because we're over time, but I do have some resources here. There's a link to the Form 990N, which is that e-postcard that most of you will need to fill out. The 990EZ or EZ, I guess it's a US form. And some information on what constitutes unrelated business income. And I also strongly encourage all of you to have a look at the Community Treasurer Handbook. It's pretty comprehensive, but at some point on a rainy day, you should read through it. At the very least, flip through it and get some awareness of what's in there. It's a really good guide to the kinds of things that treasurers should know. As I say, don't be daunted by it. It's kind of big, but it's something that at some point you should read, and most of it is the kind of stuff you should read and put away. But you should at least have a look at it once, and it can also be a good reference if questions do come up. So just some other resources of the human variety. If you have any questions about this, feel free to contact me if you think of questions later or you don't want to ask them right now. Also Erin, whose email address is here. Anne-Marie Queenie is the CAC chair on the board of directors, so she can help you out with all kinds of things. The CAC is wonderful. Oops, and it looks like I didn't update the one. I apologize, Anne-Marie. I updated your name, but I didn't update your email address. I'll make sure that I do that before I send the PDF to Erin for her to distribute. Okay, and also, of course, Liz Poland, the CEO. So again, I apologize for going over, but what we covered was submitting your budget, your community's budget properly and on time. If you still have any questions about any of this, you know, I hope I've helped make the unknown a bit more known for some of you. And if you do have any questions or guidance or comments even, feel free to let me know. And we also talked a little bit about filing income tax returns for people in the US. So we've been asking questions as we go along. If anybody has any further questions, are we getting any, Anne-Marie?
Yes, we just have two more, and if there's a time, you know, we could answer offline. First is by Erica. What do you consider to be too high of a reserve?
Good question. That's varied from year to year, but for the past few years, we generally, and I say generally because everybody's different, but between when you look at your total expenses for the year, your reserves, we generally target about 1 to 2 times that amount. So if you've got say your total expenses for the year are, I'll just say $5,000 to pull out a round number. If your reserves at the end of the year are sitting at $7,500, that's perfect. If you're below $5,000, that starts to raise a little bit of a flag with us. That sure, you know, $3,000 or $4,000 can be a lot of money, but if you've got expenses of $5,000, you know, it could be that, you know, you've got programs for which you've got a lot of revenue coming in and a lot of expenses going out. And if you're finishing the year with something on the order of $2,000 or $3,000, that might be cutting it kind of thin. Whereas another community might have, you know, expenses of $500. So for them, reserves in the $2,000 to $3,000 range would be too much relative to the kind of financial activity that they have. So it varies, but a general rule of thumb that we use is 1 to 2 times your total expenses. Okay.
Walter has a question. Is there a treasurer's mailing list?
A treasurer's mailing list. Oh, that would be nice for people to share best practices and questions and helpful hints. To my knowledge, there is not.
Perhaps that's something we can look into on the CAC.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yeah, I'm writing that down.
This is Erin. I do have a list of chapter leaders that I get every year of communication. So that's something that we may already start. So have already started with some information. So I might be just asking if that information is free to be, you know, people are okay with that information being distributed, or there's emails, and we can cover that. So we might be able,
maybe it would be a good idea for a Slack channel, perhaps. Yeah.
Exactly, that too.
And then one last question. Destiny asks, where can I find the expense fund forms?
The expense fund. Oh, is this for SIGs?
I believe she's asking for a chapter. She's said she's new. I'm new to STC. So,
great, welcome.
I don't know if it's an actual form or it's Just,
I'm not sure what she's referring to, but if she could clarify it in the chat to you. I can't see the chat. I only see the organizer's chat here. But there is an expense form for SIGs. So if a SIG leader incurs an expense, for example, they're printing or materials for the Communities Day at Summit or something of that nature, or maybe a small honorarium gift card for an event speaker, those kinds of things. There is a form that SIGs fill out so that chapter leader can get reimbursed from the monies that are earmarked for them. I mentioned at the beginning, chapters get either an electronic funds transfer or a check at the beginning of the year, and chapters have their own bank accounts, so they can look after their own finances. But okay, go ahead.
The budget forms for the year. Maybe she's asking for the template.
Oh, the budget form. No. Oh, I see. Those. So the template that I was talking about earlier, those are going to be sent out to the treasurer's email addresses that Erin has on file to all communities. So yeah, look for those in your inbox in the next couple of weeks, along with an email blast from me that Erin will send out to the addresses that she has.
All right.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. But she says, okay, thank you. Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
And of course, the treasurer handbook. All right, we have finished all the questions, and it's been a very active question panel, which is good. And,
good.
Thank you so much, James, for taking the time to explain the budget process for us. And Erin, thank you for explaining some of the STC office information.
Oh, good. You're welcome, and I hope it was of benefit to everybody.
Yes, definitely. And thank you, everyone else, for attending. We appreciate your interest, and we will be sending out a recording of this. With James is also going to provide his slides. So again, thank you very much, and all have a good evening. I guess we can stop the recording.